Welcome to the Selling with Influence podcast, where we show you how to sell more of your products and services consistently, predictably, and profitably without having to offer discounts, quote lower margins, or compete on price in a race to the bottom just to get the business. My name is Dwayne Huff, founder and CEO of Influence Seminars, and I am your host. Hey guys, it's Dwayne Huff, and I'm so glad you decided to join me for this episode. I'm going to jump into 10 reasons, if you've done sales training with your people, that it might not be taking. And maybe it's just a few of them, maybe it's one, maybe it's two, maybe it's all 10. But here's the beautiful thing. If you see one or more of these that kind of fit your situation, align with what's going on, and you can see it and say, we're not doing that, or we missed that, or we forgot to do that. That's a beautiful thing, because now you're going to have a checklist. But before I jump into there, remember, if you're listening to this on iTunes and you're getting value from it, please share it with someone and run over and give me a 5-star review on iTunes. It helps spread the word, get the message out. And if you prefer to watch via video, this is also a video podcast, and you can run over to YouTube, and I'll link to it below in this episode. But you can type in Influence Seminars, find the channel there, and like it. There's a playlist that the Selling with Influence podcast is on. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you'll be notified whenever I have new episodes released. But anyway, without further ado, let's jump into here. If you've done sales training, if you're a sales leader, if you're a business owner, CEO, you're a vice president of sales, you're a director of training, you're a sales manager, and you've made the investment in your salespeople, but you're just not getting the return on investment that you had hoped for, that you expected, or that you needed, here's 10 reasons why that might be happening. But here's what I want you to understand. You're not alone. I don't know if you know my story, but I've been in this training business for the last 12 years. I was a sales professional for 14 years, and I transitioned and started my own company doing sales training for small, medium, and large size companies across industries. I worked with over 200 companies in a sales capacity. I've had some of the best training in the world, both as an employee and in the process of doing what I do. And I've seen the ins and the outs from all different perspectives across industry. So what I'm going to share with you here is on the background of experience as a sales professional, as a business owner who sells, and having talked with thousands of sales professionals and sales leaders individually throughout the classes that I've done. So these are the things that I've seen and come to understand can keep even the best sales training from happening. And by the way, if you guys have not engaged your people, I couldn't believe I was a big company. I'm not going to name any names, but big company, huge sales force, and they had never engaged their salespeople in formal sales training where everybody was on the same page with the same sales methodology, same sales language. And I couldn't believe it. And they finally came to a place where they realized we need this. But when I heard about the way that they were going to roll out the sales training and then the follow-up that they had afterwards, I kind of cringed, because I knew in no uncertain terms that it was probably not going to take long-term. I just wasn't in the position to be able to give that advice, because it was something that I was referred into, not something that I owned, but I could see the writing on the wall. And because I've been there, I've seen it before. But without further ado, let me jump in and say, here's 10 things that you can checklist against to make sure. And if any of those need to be shored up, make sure you do that. And if I can be of help or service to you in that sales training effort, or even sales coaching and mentorship that you do with your sales rep, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm glad to have a conversation with you and see how I might be of service. But number one, I've got my notes right here to make sure that I don't miss any of the points that I want to make. But plus, I've got to keep this one pretty short, because in just a moment, I've got to go pick my son up from school. So let's jump in with number one. If you've done sales training or invested in sales training for your sales professionals, again, this is assuming that you've done that. Number one reason that it may not be taking, or it might not be lasting, or it might not be getting you the return on the investment is simply this: you stopped doing it. What do I mean by that? It means you did it once and then you expected everybody to take the information, to run with it, and to apply it to their everyday success. And as a mentor of mine, Brad Lee, says, he says, that's not training, that's exposure. So you probably invested in a day or 2 or even 3 days. Like one of my clients, Dell Computers, invests in a whole 3 days of training their people, their salespeople, in multiple different disciplines within the sales process. But they continue to nurture, to grow, to coach, to mentor, to identify specific behaviors, which we're going to talk about here in a second. but it's an ongoing thing. It's embedded in the culture. They never stop doing it. It's not a one and done proposition. It's an ongoing part of their culture. And so if you trained your salespeople, last month, last year, 5 years ago, I understand, I get it. We get busy and it can be expensive if you do it the wrong way. But if they haven't been trained recently and it's not part of your ongoing culture, matter of fact, you just stopped it and it was visited once, but it never happened again, that can be a key reason. And if you start doing it more consistently and over, that repetition, along with some other stuff that we're going to talk about here in the list, can really help that training that they got to stick and to last long-term, getting you both short-term and long-term results. So if you stop doing it, it's time to start doing it again. Number 2, you didn't define specific behaviors. And here's what I mean. Through any sales training, whatever methodology you're using, or even if you've put together your own sales methodology, there's certain behaviors that your salespeople have to be able to execute on consistently to know that they're going to get a certain result, such as anytime that they're selling in a sales conversation, there's going to be resistance, there's going to be objections, there's going to be pushback, and they have to know specifically the answers, how to handle that, how to redirect the question, how to move past them so that they can lead the customer to making the right decision for them. But that's a behavior, and it can be identified, it can be observed, it can be measured. And the reason you want to do that is because you have specific behaviors in your sales process, then they know what they're expected to do. And if you have to coach or you have to mentor them through that, you know exactly the behavior that they're missing out on. So if you can point to that and help them to perfect that or master that one behavior or one skill set within your sales process, there's a better chance that they're going to get results more consistently and predictably. Number 3, you're not coaching to the behaviors. You might not have a culture of coaching in your organization. That has to be the foundation. That has to be the first thing that you do. But even if you do, you might not be coaching to behaviors. You might be coaching to results. And that's the difference between leading indicators and lagging indicators. Obviously, if you're coaching to behaviors, you know they can produce a result in the future. So you're coaching to something that's controllable, observable, and can be redirected or improved upon. So that's a leading indicator. The lagging indicator is, you get your numbers back at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, and all of a sudden you start coaching to what you're seeing in those numbers. And I like to use the analogy of a football team. What would happen if your favorite football team or basketball team or baseball team went on the field to compete, and all they did from the moment they stepped on the field to the moment they left the game, what if all they did was constantly keep their eyes fixed on the scoreboard, and that was all they focused on? What kind of game would they play? They play a lousy game because they're not focused on the thing at hand. They're not focused on the fundamentals. They're not executing what they did in practice. And as a result, they're stumbling, they're failing, they're missing, they're not playing their best game because they're distracted. Same thing happens if your people are focused on the numbers or the money or the results from last quarter, and you're focused on that in your coaching, then you're only focused on reactive. You're only focused on those lagging indicators. But if you can focus on, here's what we need to do, here's what we need to execute upon, here's what we need to do consistently, and if we do that, the results will take care of themselves, just like a great football team or a great sports team, right? So you're not coaching to the behaviors. And if you're not doing that, I highly recommend identify those key behaviors in your sales process that you learn from sales training, put them in there, map them out, and start helping your people work towards doing that consistently. Number 4, you don't have a well-defined, proven, and repeatable sales process. I know for some people that seems just crazy, right? But believe it or not, many of the salespeople are out there doing their own thing, making it up as they go, and then maybe they develop their own sales process, but the next guy or the next girl is out there doing their own thing because there's no clearly defined process from the moment you engage a client to the moment of close. And so if you don't have that as a sales leader, there's a great way to do this. Number 1, think about all the success you've had as a seller and all the things you did consistently to get the results you got. Take that, map it out, but then go spend time with your top sellers. Because if they work for your company, being able to create a sales process based on the best practices of what they do consistently to win sales over and over again, and being able to farm that and leverage that knowledge combined with your knowledge of selling, that's what creates your own unique sales process applicable to your particular situation. So once you farm that and you map it out and you put behaviors in it, guess what? Boom. Now you have your own sales process. It's well-defined, it's clear, it's proven, and now you can train it and coach to it. Number 5, you're letting the inmates run the asylum. And that pretty much speaks for itself. But again, it goes back to each salesperson creating their own thing. You don't know what they're doing. They don't even know sometimes what they're doing. They couldn't teach it to somebody else, but they're doing their own thing out of pure survival. And the ones who can figure out their own sales process, do it their way, and kind of keep it a guarded secret, and nobody else benefits from it. But what if everybody had the same wisdom and knowledge, and they were trained properly, and they were coached properly, so that they could feel better about their selling experience, they could feel better about their career, you could feel better about coaching it, and everybody would win together. But it does not happen unless there's consistency across the organization and in your sales culture for how you guys are approaching the sale. You know, success leaves clues. We all know that. But if you're just stepping over those clues and you're not leveraging those clues, learning from those clues, and being consistent about their execution, then it's just hit and miss. It's inconsistent. It's up and down. And nobody knows from one month to the next, one quarter to the next, who's going to be successful and who's not. Number 6, you haven't established a culture of practice. And by practice, I mean role play. And when I say role play, the sales leaders and the sales professionals cringe because nobody wants to do that. However, if you've ever been part of or exposed to a culture that has really carefully built and designed and embedded a practice and role play culture, it can be fun, it can be exciting, it can be rewarding, and it can be challenging. And if you haven't, the best way to do that is create that. Support your people, encourage them, make it an environment where it's totally okay to push through the discomfort that it's going to be upfront, because you know, you've heard it before. You have salespeople who are like, oh, this isn't real world, this isn't a real situation. This is not real. It's role play and it's fake, and it doesn't, mirror real life. And the reality of the situation, if you've been a sales leader and you've been in sales for a while, you know that if they practice properly and they're trained and they go through the conversations and how to handle objections and how to have the conversation and even role playing the sales process or the sales conversations that they have, if they can execute on it in the role play situation, in the simulated situation, they're stronger. And they're much more prone to be able to go out and have intentional conversations. Here's how I know this. And it was some of the best training I ever received when I started with the first pharmaceutical company that I worked for. We had a rigorous training process. First 2 weeks at home study, and then 2 weeks in the classroom with all of our peers. And for, the better part of that 2 weeks, from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 5 o'clock at night, sometimes till 6 and 7, we were role playing, breaking it down into small little pieces, role playing that one part, putting it back in the rest of it, and giving each other feedback, and created an environment where it was not only mandatory to do it, but it was okay to fail. It was okay to make mistakes. They had your back and they supported you and encouraged you, even when you got into the field. And I never received better training before or since. I mean, just before or after. It was just absolutely amazing. So I saw firsthand the power of a culture that has practice and role play as a consistent activity. And for some people that are watching this, maybe once a day, at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, probably at the beginning, kind of get you charged up. Maybe it's once a week, but it has to be consistent. It has to be expected. It has to be put together in the right way. And as a leader, if you're bringing your people through that, it can really change the game super quick, especially whenever you're putting behaviors inside the sales process and really talking about some of the things that need to be practiced in order to be effective with your people. So create that culture of practice. Number 7, sales training is not enough. Sales training is never enough. Sales training is designed to do one thing: teach you how to sell and close a sale. And I get it and I understand that's the goal. I get it. I understand. But here's the problem with that, is that so many sales professionals don't understand that even in a lost sale, or even in a call that goes badly, or even in delay or objection or pushback, or we're not interested in any form of what would seem like a loss, there's a lot of opportunity to build relationships, to connect, to serve, and to be seen as a resource so that when it is time to buy, they buy. But not only that, when they don't buy from us, they tell others about us. It gives us the ability to understand some key fundamentals that need to happen within the sales process that normally don't. Skill sets, if you will, like leadership, like advanced communication, like advanced listening, negotiation skills. Most people don't even realize they're negotiating because they can't negotiate price. And that's only 10% of what a negotiation is. Every sales conversation is a negotiation. If they don't understand, can't identify that, can't realize the opportunity there, guess what? That's opportunity and money left on the table, right? So that, and leadership skills, presentation skills, how they're presenting their products or services, their solution in a way that resonates with a value that a customer or potential buyer seeks. Sales training doesn't do that. There's no time to do that. It's not designed to do that. So sales training is good. So is product knowledge. But if they don't have those other skill sets, and let me just say this, you could spend a day and invest in a day of that type of training for your salespeople, but it's not necessary. Over the past 12 years, I've been brought in to do sales training, both beginning and advanced, but also, hey, Dwayne, I think our people need to learn how to negotiate because they're giving up profit margin. Can you come show them how to do it? Yes. I think our people are lacking leadership skills because they're not really seeing the big picture of being a servant and of really solving problems and helping their customers. Can you come teach them that? Dwayne, they're not connecting with the difficult people that they interact with and they lose business as a result. Can you come show them that? And so over time, I started to realize that selling skills were not enough. Product knowledge was not enough. It was the ability to influence and ebb and flow with a customer, prospect, a potential buyer. That's kind of like ornamentation in the sales process. In fact, while I'm thinking about it, I've got more information. There's a free video. There's a 16-minute free video of the Selling with Influence model that outlines this very succinctly. So if you'd like to learn more about how to infuse that stuff into the current sales process or sales conversation, run over to sellingwithinfluence.com and check that out. It's free of charge. You don't have to drop an email address in there. So sales training is not enough. Number 8, you're relying too heavily on the numbers. You're relying too heavily on the numbers. I know sales managers, sales leaders, sales VPs, CEOs, executives, they're constantly crunching and looking at the numbers. I remember whenever I was in my second pharmaceutical sales job, my manager was constantly evaluating, crunching, discerning numbers. And she'd come to me and she'd say, I need you to look at your territory and crunch these numbers. I'm like, I ain't doing that. You can spend your time doing that. I ain't doing that. I'm going to be in front of the customer, really learning how to influence the opportunity and the sale and the buying decisions. And I'm really going to have my finger on the pulse of what's going on inside that customer's business and inside that customer's life. And here's what I would invite you to do. Numbers are important. I'm not saying that numbers, they'll saying that numbers don't lie. True enough. But numbers, as you know, don't always tell the whole story. And the only way to figure out the nuances and the subtleties and whether the customer's in it to win it or bluffing or smoke screening before they actually do it is to be in there with your salespeople in their accounts. Now, if you're not used to doing that, or if I've seen so many sales reps like, I don't want my manager in my account, I don't want my manager in my account. And there's only reason for that. They've had a bad experience, or you haven't created the culture where that's acceptable, the norm, and it's beneficial to the rep. But if you can show them how being there with them to help them to hear, because 2 eyes are better than one, 2 sets of ears are better than one. And if you can get that perspective and help them to see the little distinctions, boom, game changer, right? So while numbers are important, and I'm not dismissing that, they're not the whole story. So get out of the numbers and get into the customer accounts and really understand what's going on in the customer's world and the dynamic that the sales professional's bringing into that customer. Number 9, you're not consistently sharing wins and opportunities. Blows my mind. I'll get in a sales training with a group of salespeople, and I'll say, how often do you guys get together to talk about wins and losses, pitfalls, what I like to call success stories and war stories? And I can remember a time in my sales career where the only time that would happen was at annual sales meetings where we all got together. We love getting together because we'd share war stories. It made us feel better that we weren't just the only ones on the front line, and that the junk stuff that was happening to us was happening to other people. But then also share victories and successes, and hey, here's what's working for me. In fact, in my first pharmaceutical sales job, we kind of had that informal way of doing that, is I'd connect with one or two of my counterparts in different areas of the country, and we'd visit like, once a month on the phone, but we'd spend a couple of hours on the phone talking about what was working, what wasn't working. There's an old adage that says a rising tide raises all boats. When your salespeople can come together as a team consistently, and I would recommend at least once a week, coming together for the sole purpose of brainstorming, spitballing, and masterminding. Masterminding meaning the collective mind is better than the single mind, and share successes, wins, and victories first. And just letting everybody go around the room and talk about what's working, where their victories have come, why they happen, what they attribute the success to. And then flipping the coin and saying, okay, where were some of the struggles, some of the opportunities, some of the pitfalls? And allowing that to surface. And then masterminding that. And it kind of happens organically because somebody will say, oh, I faced that. Here's how I overcame that. Or, hey, don't try this. I've tried that 3 times, fell flat on my face. Well, why did you fall flat on your face? Well, I realized it was something all my customers weren't dealing with that I was trying to adjust, and it fell flat, or whatever the case might be. But that collective mind, the mastermind, is so much stronger, and that rising tide raises all boats when they come together and share success stories and war stories. And as a manager, as a sales leader, you have to facilitate that and create that in your culture, and that will help the sales training to stick even more, right? And then finally, number 10, your salespeople aren't taking ownership of their sales results or their sales career. I do a program called Write Your Own Ticket, and it's all about taking ownership of your sales career and your sales results. But I had to ask myself, and I had to ask some other reps out in the territory, why is it that they weren't taking ownership of their sales results or their sales career? And I'd ask their managers and their leaders, and I'd say, what do you think is going on? So it's an informal survey, but I looked at my own career and saw it was absolutely true, and it's this. Unfortunately, in so many sales organizations, salespeople have kind of started approaching their sales jobs as just that. It's a great way to make some money. I get time and freedom, but if I don't make my numbers, whoops, I'm fired and I'm on to another job. So it's kind of like a churn and burn or a high turnover. And I know in some industries it's less than others, but I think the corporate culture has created that to some extent. Whereas when you get into the smaller businesses, many times they're not as ready to cut and run their salespeople because they've made an investment in them. But whenever somebody's part of that culture and they're used to having 90 days to make their numbers, or they go on a performance improvement plan or any other culture that's like that, all of a sudden they become skeptical, they become cynical, they become jaded, and they don't want to really fully engage and invest themselves because like, why would I do that? I'm just going to be on to somewhere else, right? And it's not everybody, I get it, I understand, but if the sales training's not taken, it's because they're not taking responsibility for their sales efforts and their sales results. And so here's how I can suggest that you can help that situation along. Number 1, build strong relationships with all your salespeople. Let them know you have their back. You're going to the mat for them. You're going to the distance for them. Every day show up and say, what can I give you guys, or how can I help you to be successful, and be committed to providing everything they need to succeed, including training, but also support, a listening ear, a non-judgmental environment, and coaching and mentorship should they start to falter, even if they've had a bad month, a bad quarter, or a bad year, right? So go back through over that list. I'm going to put the show notes below this and list those out and just check them off and see, if there's somewhere that it's not happening, and that might be the answer as to how to make that sales training take short and long term. Until we talk again, stay tuned. I've got some great interviews coming up where and I'm doing some interviews, live interviews with sales professionals, CEOs, and people in the sales industry to talk about their successes, their victories, their wins, and things that might help and serve you and your sales professionals. But if you're not seeing your sales training take, these are 10 common reasons I've seen for the last 12 years formally, but throughout my sales career, that could be the answer to taking that investment that you made in sales training already and helping it to finally start paying off the way you expected. And listen, if I can help you guys, whether it's sales training, advanced sales training, or just being an ear, a sounding board, to help you strategize and think of a way to help your salespeople sell more consistently, predictably, and profitably, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Run over to sellingwithinfluence.com. And remember, unlike any other profession out there, you and your salespeople can write their own ticket more than any other profession. They've just got to be willing to increase their influence, sell with influence, and think more than just about the sale, but about the vast opportunity that comes with every sales interaction. Hope you guys are doing well. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.